Now we want to turn our attention to probably the first big election in a worldwide sense that's going to happen in 2023. That's Taiwan on January 13th, and a lot of implications there. We are very, very honored to be joined here by the peace activist and scholar on geopolitics of Asia, as well as an organizer with Pivot to Peace, KJ No. KJ, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's really a pleasure to have you. I think probably most people in the United States and maybe other places in the world are not aware of the fact that Taiwan has its elections for regional leadership coming up in just a couple weeks. So, I mean, maybe, but I think most people probably have some sense that it has a lot to do with what's happening in the mainland China as well. So maybe just give us a sense, if you can, who are some of the main players in this Taiwanese election, and what are their stances towards some of the issues we all hear a lot about regarding the mainland?
Yes, this is a very, very critical election. There are three main parties that are contending. That is the incumbent party, which is the DPP, Democratic Progressive Party. Their candidate is William Lai and Louise Xiao. There's also the TPP, which is kind of a newer independent party, which has whose main candidate, whose presidential candidate is Ko Wen-je. And then there is the established KMT, and they are the opposition. They're the main opposition, and they're led by Hu Yu-yi. Now, let me ask you a question. There's William Lai, Ko Wen-je, and Hu Yu-yi. Which individual do you think is the U.S. candidate?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I mean, I guess I would go with the first because of where the DPP has been so far, but I perhaps could be wrong.
Wait, can I say what I was going to say? Can I say what I was going to say? But I'm probably wrong. I was going to go trick question, all of them, but I don't know. Sorry.
Well, I think you're not far from the truth, but the party that is most clearly and obviously aligned with the United States is the DPP. They're essentially a U.S. Quisling party, and I say that with all seriousness. All their candidates have American names. The vice presidential candidate, Louise Xiao, she was born in Japan. She's an American citizen. Her mother was American. She grew up in New Jersey, went to school in New Jersey and New York. And she's essentially the American darling. She's currently the person who is she's the kind of Taiwan authority representative to the United States and the darling of the U.S. right wing.
Wow. Okay. Well, that reminds me of some of the people in charge in Lebanon, actually, where they've the most notable. I mean, it's true. Like the politicians with the closest ties to the U.S. tend to be people who are educated in the U.S. In some cases, born in the U.S. They have U.S. citizenship, and they have that ideology sort of baked into the way they see the world, and they've come up being groomed in institutions that prepared them for this Quisling role. As you referred to it. But all that said, what are the differences in how they want to deal with China, I guess, is what people would want to know most, because obviously we know Taiwan is a huge sticking point for the U.S. in terms of projecting U.S. power against China and essentially, going to war in various ways against China and trying to destabilize the country. So let's play this out. If this person wins, what happens in terms of the broader Cold War with China versus if the other person wins?
Well, I think that's really the question that everybody's asking, and it's very, very important. Essentially, the U.S. is in the process of Ukrainizing Taiwan. It has legislation put into place, measures put into place, institutions put into place that are preparing Taiwan to become the next Ukraine. And I say that historically, Taiwan has always served that role. In fact, the Ukrainian Nazis, have a continuity with the Taiwanese fascists. There's a long, long history through the World Anti-Communist League. The reason why we still have Ukrainian Nazis that are powerful is because Taiwan supported them for decades. So Taiwan was a center of fascist dirty war, subversion and propagation. We're talking about Latin America. That's why all of Taiwan's allies were Latin American and also Croatian Nazis, Ukrainian Nazis, Eastern European Nazis, along with Japanese war criminals and South Korean dictators. Taiwan was kind of like the global center of this. And so anybody who tells you that Taiwan was some kind of model democracy is completely out of touch with reality. But going back to your question, the DPP, as I said, is the US Quisling party, and they are running on their platform is that they are independent from China, that they are already independent, they're de facto independent. They don't even need to declare it, and that's their platform. And so any movement or any increase by the DPP will result in more tension with China, and the US is placing all of its bets on the DPP. They want the DPP to win because the DPP is the US Quisling party. The KMT wants to have good relations with China. They are, second in the running. They're about 4 to 5 percentage points behind the DPP, but they are within striking distance. And so there's a lot of hotly contested politics. The DPP is currently saying that a vote for the opposition party is a vote for China. They're using this kind of very, Russiagate type campaigning, because essentially that's all they have to run on. And then Ko Wen-je from the TPP is popular with the youth. He's kind of moderate, but he doesn't want to rock the boat. I don't think that he's interested in a kind of independent separatist line. But the DPP has been pushing this independent separatist line for over 2 decades. And if they continue in their ways, they will clearly serve as a trigger for war. And as I said again, the United States is preparing Taiwan for war with China. It will be the key trigger. It will be the new Ukraine. And so I think a lot is hanging on this election, which will happen within 10 days.
I think that's such an important point about the U.S. preparing Taiwan for war with China, because the way this is presented is at least in the United States, I should say, is with an air of inevitability. Like China is going to use force to, seize Taiwan. I mean, obviously there's so many distortions in the way it's presented, but that it's really just a matter of when, not if, that there is a malevolent attempt by China to go to war, to destroy Taiwan, so on and so forth, and that's just the way it is. And that is then, of course, why the U.S. has to do X, Y, and Z. So I was hoping you could actually just speak to this issue of China's attitude towards reunification, which, seems to bear very little resemblance to what the United States claims their agenda is.
Yeah, China's attitude towards reunification is that essentially that the Taiwanese are kindred. They are our family. We are one family, and that is the truth. Literally, 90% of people on Taiwan Island have direct connections to the mainland. Many of them have relatives that they go and visit, and so Taiwan is China. It is a part of China. One of the key lies that people are being told is that first that Taiwan province is not Chinese. That's absolutely wrong. They speak Chinese, they eat Chinese food, the clothing is Chinese, the religion, the rituals, the holidays, everything is Chinese. The national airline is China Airlines. Their museum has 700,000 artifacts from China. So Taiwan is China, but what the current US propaganda is saying is that Taiwan is not Chinese. It is de facto independent or quote unquote self-governing, which is a complete misrepresentation of the understanding of the world and the United Nations. And then they also argue that it's a model democracy. And as I pointed out, that's hardly the case. Certainly, historically, it has been one of the worst dictatorships on the planet, not simply against its own people, but it has been a malign actor across the planet, most certainly in Latin America. The death squads were trained and run out of Taiwan Island. And then the myth that the United States is putting forth is that China is imminently preparing to attack Taiwan Island, that it's threatening Taiwan all the time. Now, that is completely untrue, but what is true, and I'll give you an analogy, is that if you had somebody in your family and they locked themselves in their room, and then somebody was continually giving them weapons and arms and gasoline and explosives, how long would you put up with that? That's the issue that China is facing. And that's also the issue that the United States is trying to use as a trigger or a casus belli. I want to be very, very specific. Last year there was this legislation called Taiwan Policy Act, which was then renamed TERRA, which was then snuck into the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. And this is essentially a document, it's a legislative document that is preparing Taiwan Island for war. Section 204 requires the US to do an assessment of the commitment of Taiwan to implement a military strategy, assessment of Taiwan to employ its forces in intervention, including long-range fires, anti-ship cruise missiles, land attack cruise missiles, undersea warfare, survivable swarming maritime assets, manned and unmanned aerial systems, mining and counter-mining capabilities, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities. All of this is preparation for war. And of course, they also know that the vast majority of people on Taiwan Island do not want to get into a war, and they want to keep the status quo. And so this legislation also requires an assessment of the steps taken by Taiwan to enhance the readiness of its defense forces, the extent to which it's requiring and providing regular training, the sufficiency of financial and budgetary resources towards readiness of such forces, assessment of steps to ensure the Reserve Command can recruit, equip, and train its forces, analysis of manpower shortages, measures to address such shortages, et cetera, and also measures to place US officials inside both Taiwan's military and its government. As we speak, the US is training. It has hundreds of trainers on Taiwan Island right now, and it has also brought troops from Taiwan Island onto US soil. It's training them for war. It is the Ukraine plan just simply being repeated.
Well, a lot to continue to follow there and a lot at stake, as you pointed out in the very beginning in this election, and we will continue to follow it and continue to cover it. And we really appreciate you, KJ No, activist, scholar, and organizer with Pivot to Peace, for some of your time here in the Freedom Side.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.